Hello and welcome to another short commentary from our Bible reading this week in 1 Corinthians chapters 1 and 2. I want to focus on a particular passage here in chapter 1. In verse number 13, as Paul had reminded the saints that there was to be no divisions among them, there have been quarreling among the saints, and this certainly was a problem that needed to be addressed. He said in verse 13, "Has Christ been divided? Paul was not crucified for you, was he? Or were you baptized in the name of Paul? I thank God that I baptized none of you except Crispus and Gaius, so that no one would say you were baptized in my name or by my authority. Now I did baptize also the household of Stephanas, who I believe we read about the end of the book. Beyond that, I do not know whether I baptized any other. For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not in cleverness of speech, so that the cross of Christ would not be made void." So sometimes people have used this passage to say that baptism is not necessary for the forgiveness of sins. But we know that it is. We know that in Acts 18, as we talked about yesterday, the saints in Corinth, they heard, they believed, and they were baptized. We know in other areas of Scripture where Paul proclaimed the gospel that people were also being baptized for their forgiveness of sins. And this is how one was now justified and how they were now redeemed from their sins by being forgiven and having all their sins washed away. And so as you look at this passage here, Paul does talk a great deal about baptism, and he simply talks about some of the people that he had baptized in verse number 14 and then also in verse number 16. So when Paul is saying, "For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel," he's not saying that baptism is not necessary for salvation. His primary goal was to go out and proclaim the gospel. It wasn't necessarily to put everyone under the water when that time came for them to be baptized. But he's not teaching that baptism is not essential. He's just trying to emphasize what he was called to do, and that was to preach the gospel. He did at times baptize some of the people that he taught, but then obviously there have been other times where other individuals would have carried out and assisted in that baptism. And so when he says Christ did not send me to baptize but to preach the gospel, I think it's the idea he didn't merely send them out to perform that action of putting people under the water. His primary mission was to go out and to proclaim the gospel, which would entail or include helping people to see that they needed to be baptized for the remission of their sins. So don't be confused with what he says here. Baptism, make no mistake about it, it is necessary for salvation. I hope this helps. Talk to you later. Take care, and God bless.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook for more content like this.